Canada has been lying to the world through food. Hawaiian pizza? Canadian. California roll? Probably not as Californian as you think, but those famous gotcha foods are only the surface. The real Canadian food map is split between two worlds almost nobody covers. Indigenous survival foods that predate the country itself, and bizarre regional fast food empires Canadians defend like religion. Forget lumberjack meals. Forget 90s snack nostalgia. This is the Canadian food history people actually fight about. By focusing entirely on vintage logging camps and discontinued corporate lunchbox treats, everyone is ignoring the two most fiercely defended corners of the Canadian menu. First, the brilliant ancient survival diets created by Indigenous peoples long before a European boat ever touched the shoreline. Second, the wild, completely underground networks of hyper-regional fast food that modern Canadians will literally fight to defend in online comment sections. If you want to know what this massive country actually eats, forget the maple syrup. Today, we are opening the vault on the forgotten Canadian foods that YouTube ignored, the original Indigenous survival diets, and the secret regional takeout inventions. The internet loves a good survival story, which is why logging camp meals cooked in dirt holes or thick slices of hardtack get millions of views. The internet also loves nostalgia, mourning the loss of the original Joss Lewis cake or the yellow cherry blossom chocolate box. But Canada has a secret culinary double life that is much older and much more modern than those two extremes. To understand the true food culture of this country, we need to strip away the settler history and look at the foods that built the absolute foundation of North American survival. Then we need to fast forward to the streets of modern Canadian cities, where bizarre, highly specific local takeout foods are treated with the exact same reverence as religion. This is the unedited, hyper-local, ancient, and deeply weird map of Canadian food. Let's start by setting the historical record straight with the true foundation of survival in North America. Long before French settlers arrived, and long before lumberjacks were eating massive plates of beans and salt pork, Indigenous peoples had already mastered extreme weather nutrition. Enter pemmican. This is the ultimate original survival food. Created by First Nation peoples, pemmican was sustaining life on this continent long before the French ever landed their boats. While early logging cooks were desperately trying to stretch barrels of salt meat to keep men alive, Indigenous populations had already perfected a far superior, calorie-dense travel food that allowed them to thrive in brutal winters. Then there is bannock. This is a fundamental, historic bread made by many Indigenous peoples across the entirety of North America. Long before rural community cookbooks were printing recipes for pie crusts or sourdough pancakes, bannock was actively feeding communities. Today, it remains deeply beloved. In online forums, when asked about true Canadian foods, locals immediately point to pemmican and bannock as crucial, foundational pieces of the country's culinary heritage that are far too often left out of the mainstream conversation. Now, let's fast forward from ancient survival to modern takeout. Canada has a bizarre habit of inventing massive, global fast food trends and letting other places take the credit. Hawaiian pizza? The entire world endlessly debates whether pineapple belongs on pizza, but very few people know where the debate actually started. It was not born on a beach in Hawaii. It was invented in the small town of Chatham, Ontario. The California roll is even more controversial. The name suggests a Los Angeles creation, but its true origin is a massive point of international dispute. Sushi chefs in Vancouver, British Columbia, actively lay claim to inventing it. The battle over who created the California roll is fiercely contested between Vancouver and Los Angeles to this day. And if that wasn't enough culinary innovation for one coast, Canada is also responsible for inventing the sushi pizza. Let's move inland to Calgary, Alberta. This western city quietly gifted the culinary world two massive restaurant staples. First, the Caesar cocktail is a highly savory drink that completely dominates Canadian brunches. Second, Western-style ginger beef. If you have ever ordered crispy, sticky, deep-fried ginger beef from a takeout menu, you are not eating a traditional Asian dish. You are eating a brilliant Calgary invention. But Canada does not just export its fast food inventions to the globe, it hoards the most specific, bizarre regional dishes strictly for itself. These are hyper-local takeout foods that are virtually unheard of once you cross a provincial border. But inside their hometowns, they are fiercely defended cults. Take the province of Manitoba. In Manitoba, honey dill sauce is not just a chicken finger condiment, it is a cultural pillar. One local perfectly summarized the obsession. Honey dill sauce is as culturally significant to Manitoba as the legendary rock band The Tragically Hip is to the rest of Canada. It is wildly popular within the province, yet completely unheard of everywhere else. In Edmonton, Alberta, the absolute must-have local takeout obsession is the green onion cake. Head to Ontario, where Windsor fiercely defends its very own distinctive creation, Windsor-style pizza. Go all the way to the East Coast to Halifax, Nova Scotia. It is the undisputed king of the donair. This is not just a late-night wrap. It is a massive part of Halifax's street food identity. However, some of the most fascinating regional foods are the historic recipes that confuse outsiders completely. Let's talk about Acadian food in New Brunswick and southwestern Nova Scotia. When most people hear the word poutine, they immediately picture French fries covered in cheese curds and gravy. But Acadian communities serve poutine râpée. Do not let the name fool you. This is an entirely different culinary experience. Poutine râpée is a savory pork mixture completely covered in mashed potatoes, rolled up into a massive ball, boiled, and often served with molasses or brown sugar. It is a highly specific, beloved Acadian creation. Southwestern Nova Scotia is also the home of râpée pie, another deeply traditional French Acadian dish. Acadian communities also invented ployés. Originating in the Madawaska region, right on the border of Quebec and New Brunswick, this bright yellow flatbread is an exercise in culinary genius. It is made from a watery mixture of buckwheat flour, wheat flour, baking powder, and water. You pour a ladle of this thin liquid onto a smoking hot cast iron griddle, and almost instantly, hundreds of tiny bubbles form and pop across the surface, creating a distinct porous texture that looks like a yellow sponge. The brilliant part is you only cook it on one side. You never use a spatula to flip it, leaving the bottom slightly crispy while the top remains soft and tacky. Historically, it was smothered in dark maple syrup or used as a cheap bread substitute to soak up savory meat gravies. Speaking of savory gravies, if you want ultimate East Coast comfort food, there is chicken fricot. This fiercely historic Acadian chicken stew predates modern Canada. The cook browns a whole, cut-up chicken to render the savory animal fat, then drops a handful of raw flour directly into the hot grease to form a quick roux. Hit immediately with cold water, it creates a wonderfully thick, velvety broth, heavily seasoned with summer savory, an earthy herb that absolutely defines East Coast historical cooking. Small, dense dough balls known as grand pares are dropped directly into the simmering liquid to cook in the savory chicken fat. Newfoundland takes extreme regional survival food to another level. They proudly serve fried cod tongues, an iconic local classic. Fish and brewis is a wildly traditional dish made from hard bread and salt fish. When they needed dessert without proper baking ovens, Newfoundland cooks invented figgy duff. They mixed flour, molasses, butter, and massive handfuls of dried raisins, locally called figs, into a dark, sticky batter. They scooped the batter into a clean cotton pudding bag, tied it securely with twine, and submerged the whole sack in a violently boiling pot, right alongside cooking vegetables or salt beef, for over 2 hours. The hot water cooked the dough from the outside in, creating a dense, deeply spiced, cake-like texture that transformed basic ship provisions into an incredibly warming winter treat. Even the desserts in this country have strict, fiercely defended borders. Out west on the prairies, the Saskatoon berry pie is a massive source of local pride, utilizing the hyper-local Saskatoon berries. In Ontario, the butter tart reigns supreme, with the very first recorded recipe believed to have been printed in a vintage community cookbook from Barrie. British Columbia proudly claims the Nanaimo bar, hailing directly from the town of Nanaimo. It is so culturally important, the town's local university recently broke the world record for making the largest Nanaimo bar in history. And we cannot talk about the prairies without mentioning flapper pie. This towering dessert was a massive hit across Alberta and Saskatchewan during the 1920s and the 1930s. It features a buttery graham crust, a wobbly vanilla custard filling, heavily thickened with cornstarch, and a towering, fluffy layer of browned meringue. It grew so popular during the Flapper Girl era that it was a mandatory fixture in every cafe across the prairie provinces. Even Depression-era kitchens could pump it out because the pantry ingredients were incredibly cheap. Today, it is largely considered a forgotten dessert by national media, but families out west still deeply love it. And iconic spots like the 24-hour Blackfoot Truck Stop Diner in Calgary still serve slices today. Finally, during the harsh economic collapse of the late 1920s, Montreal factory workers invented pudding chômeur, or poor man's pudding, out of sheer desperation. You start by creating a basic, slightly dense, white cake batter, but instead of baking it normally, you pour an enormous amount of boiling hot maple syrup or just brown sugar water directly over the raw dough. Baking science performs a spectacular trick. As the pan heats up, the thick batter physically rises to the top, while the sugary liquid sinks to the very bottom, creating a flawless, fluffy, pale cake, sitting on top of a rich, bubbling caramel sauce. Key insight: what connects a 10,000-year-old indigenous survival food like pemmican with a styrofoam container of Halifax donair, or a plate of Edmonton green onion cakes? The connection is absolute, unapologetic regional identity. Canada is simply too vast to have one unified menu. The foods that truly define the culture did not come from massive global corporations or fancy culinary schools. They were born out of hyper-specific local environments. Pemmican was created because First Nations peoples needed high-density fuel to survive brutal winters long before European contact. Flapper pie was born because isolated prairie families needed a cheap, comforting dessert during the 1920s. And modern dishes like Windsor pizza and honey dill sauce were created because tight-knit communities wanted a specific flavor they could call their very own. Why it matters. When food history channels exclusively focus on the 8,000 calories eaten by lumberjacks or the tragic corporate demise of Hostess chips and Dunkaroos, they are missing the actual breathing food culture of the country. Food is not just an interesting recipe or a hit of nostalgia, it is a territorial flag. When a Manitoban defends honey dill sauce or a Vancouverite claims the California roll, they are actively defending their hometown's place in the world. More importantly, when we finally talk about bannock and pemmican, we are acknowledging the indigenous cultures that actually established the culinary foundation of North America. These hyper-regional foods prove that, despite the spread of massive global fast food chains, local culture refuses to die. So I have a massive question for you. Who do you think really invented the California roll, Vancouver, or Los Angeles? Let me know down in the comments. I also want to hear about your local takeout secrets. Do you dip your chicken in Manitoba honey dill sauce, or are you waiting in line for Edmonton green onion cakes? Drop your hyper-local foods below, because that comment section is about to become the ultimate secret Canadian menu. Hit that subscribe button if you love deep dives into real food history. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.